let's start the class by looking at our schedule. And if you look at the schedule, what we've done, obviously, we've got to the place. We've got one more topic before the term break, and that's this Horizon Computers and User GPOs. To be honest, we actually did the Horizon Computer GPOs last week, but today we're going to finish it off by looking at the User GPOs. Okay, but then we have a topic which is to start the assessment 1 next week. That's where you're actually doing assessment 1. And obviously then we have our 2-week break, and then we come back after that and we'll look at managing the environment, and we'll look at Horizon apps, and then we'll discuss the assignment 2, which is probably the harder one of the two, but it's a modification of what you did for the previous virtualization subject. So you should have a lot of that, but you need to adjust it to include the virtualization for the desktops, and that would mean probably more hosts at a minimum, okay? Because obviously we're not just virtualizing the servers anymore, we're virtualizing the hosts as well. The desktops as well. And obviously then we finish off the topics, and then you submit your work and so forth, okay? So this is a good chance, especially if you're behind with the worksheets, to catch up and start doing the assignments, because we've got next week to do the assignments, got the 2-week holidays to actually catch up on everything and maybe get the bulk of the assignments done, because really, I reckon you could do probably more than half right now of the assignment, okay, based on what you've done previously, the previous subject, as well as what we've done in this class so far. So that's what the plan is, okay, Roman? So no class next week because there's no new information. I will come and open this room for you if you want to use this room. And I'm not sure about your other subjects, but I can open this room at 9 a.m. if you want to. Actually, I'll open before 9 a.m. and you can stay in here and keep on working, or you want to use the A113. Okay, it's up to you. Okay. So like I said, like you mentioned, we've made the security guards are very strict here. And unless I'm physically here, normally you're not allowed to be in the classroom. But we've made the A113 available to students from the morning to the night. And obviously you would just find a computer with that's that in the side or corner that you're not disturbing any other class, and you just work on it, okay? Those computers are a little bit older than what we got in here, because obviously this has been recently updated, but that's still got 32 gigs of RAM. It's still got i7 CPU, and it's still got solid state hard drive, which is what you need, okay? So it might not be exactly as good as these ones, but it's still doable. If, on the other hand, like I said, next Tuesday, I can open the room at 9 a.m. or just before 9 a.m. And you can stay here for the whole class if you like, okay? But there's no topic next week, just working on the assignment and catching up on your worksheets, okay? So that'll give you a bit of chance, and obviously then in the term break, I won't be here at all. But I believe the 113, which is that cybersecurity room, will be open as normal for students to use. So you can still use those, okay? But you said you had a home computer that was fairly decent. No, not decent enough. Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, i5 CPU, depending on what age, obviously, it can be a problem, because obviously if we're talking about this subject and the other virtualization subject, the cores is the most important thing as far as the CPU, not so much the speed, but i5, do you know what generation? Okay, Gen 9. i5 Gen 9, number of cores. 6 cores? We'll find out in 1 second, 9-4 something. Yeah, you're right. There's let's have a look. Yeah, I think it's 6 cores. Yep, right there. Which is not as great. You're right. It's not as great, but it's better than the i5s that we had before. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's not ideal, but it's not too bad either. Okay. So if we actually look at what we got on this computer, which is what we've been using in this classroom, you can see with the CPU, it's a 13th gen i7, and it's got 16 cores. Okay, so and also the other classroom, it's a 14th gen, and I think that's got 20 cores. So that's in A105. So that's even better. To be honest, I should go have a look who's in A105 right now. Maybe we can swap. Just give me 1 minute, okay? Unfortunately, there is a class in there, so we can't just swap. But I think this is okay anyway. It seems to be working for you anyway, Roman. Yeah. And that's the main thing. We don't need to run well. We just need it to run, okay? And we just have to accept the fact that that's the limitations of the hardware. But anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about today. Okay, so last week we started talking about configuring the virtual desktops with our group policy objects. And we specifically imported a bundle that's for the which we imported into the domain controller, and they were specific VMware GPOs that we could configure. And we're going to continue with that. And today we're going to look at user GPOs. And to be honest, if you were to ask me, is this today's topic very important? I would say not really. Okay, it's just a couple of more settings we give you. For example, we talk about we know from the past, there's obviously GPOs, group policy objects for users and for computers. Okay, the users follow the user onto the computer, and obviously the ones for computer follows the computer regardless who's the user. And to be honest, I would personally only configure the computer GPOs, because the computer GPOs we know are virtual desktops, don't we? We 100% know that they're going to be virtual desktops. They're not going to be any physical machines, are they? So we know that it doesn't matter who's going to be logging into those computers, they're going to be virtual desktops. So we can always configure those things. But the problem is, what if you configure some user GPOs? Well, what if they're logged into a physical machine instead of a virtual machine? So because they follow the user, they'll try to apply those same GPOs to the physical machines rather than the virtual desktop. So it's not going to make a huge deal, but it's just, you see how it's inefficient, right? So it's a little bit inefficient. So today's topic is not that important. Okay, it's a continuation of what we talked about last week. We're going to use the same bundle. We're going to test out a few GPOs in the user space, and we're going to talk about some of the more information. So it's going to be a quick and easy topic. Okay, Robin? So if let's say you say, oh, I don't have time to do this worksheet, in my opinion, not a big deal, you know what I mean? Not a big deal, because I think if anything, last week's one gave us all the information we need to know about the GPOs. It's just that this one is a little bit more. And to be honest, like we said to you, Roman, that we're developing this subject as we go along. And obviously, sometimes we say, oh, we had to review it. Was that good? Was that not good? So maybe in the future, I'll just combine this user and the previous topic into one bigger topic, rather than having it as a separate topic. But right now, that's what we got this semester, and I'll make changes for next semester anyway. So if you ask me, do I need to do this worksheet? It's up to you, okay? It doesn't make a huge difference, okay? Because, yeah, I'd rather you work on the assignment rather than do this worksheet, to be honest, okay? So let's get on with the topic today, and we'll finish it very quickly, and then I'll get rid of this one, which is last week, so I always don't shut it down properly. And then you can keep on working onto your things, and I've got a couple of students here doing a test, and I'll see how they're going, and obviously help them out if they need to, and you work on your stuff, okay? So it's only 14 slides, and most of it is going to be about specific settings. So continue on with the group policy objects. Now we're going to look at the user group policy settings. So like I said, it's a continuation from last week, where we looked at the computer configurations, And the settings we're going to look at are still part of that VMware GPO bundle. So today's objective is to look at some of the pre-built user policy settings, manage the virtual desktop machine with the user GPO settings, and here's a couple of things to remember about user GPOs. Okay, they apply to the user regardless of the computer they are logged onto. So it doesn't matter if they logged onto a, like I said, in a physical machine or virtual machine, these GPOs are going to follow them everywhere. So in some ways, I'd prefer rather configure the computer GPOs rather than the user GPOs, and you'll see that that's basically the theme. Okay, so the difference between user GPOs and computer GPOs, besides one's applied to the user regardless of the computer they're sitting on, which is the user GPOs, and the computer GPOs are applied to the computer regardless of who the user is. The other difference, major difference, is that computer group policies are applied when the computer turns on. Okay, so when you boot up. Okay, whereas user GPOs are applied when the user logs in. It sort of makes sense because the computer knows who they are, and you know who the computers are as soon as they start up and connect to Active Directory to find out information like the service, the service records, like with the DNS. But you only know the user is that user when that user logs on, right? So that's why the GPOs for user are applied at logon. But the similarities is that both GPOs, it doesn't matter if it's user or computer, may take between 90 and 120 minutes for any policy changes to apply. All right, so we can force this a little bit with the GP update command with the force. And also we can force this a little bit by restarting the virtual machine or restarting the computer if it wasn't virtual machines, and maybe logging on again. Okay, so we can force this a little bit, but sometimes you just got to remember, if we do something, it doesn't mean we're going to see it straight away, and that's sometimes frustrating. But that's how it works. In real life, it doesn't really make a difference because in real life, these policy changes are not necessarily urgent. They're just changes, and if it doesn't take place until the next time the person logs in, or could be tomorrow, could be 2 hours from now, it doesn't really make a big difference in normal production. But let's get on with those configurations. Like I said, we're not going to look at anything that's dramatically new. A lot of the same settings can be found in the computer as well as the user. Because, like I said, if they're in the computer, they follow the computer setting, computer account. If they're in the user settings, they follow the user account. So we're just looking at some of them which are different. So if you remember, we talked about display scaling previously, but this is for the VMware Horizon Client software. Okay, configurations under the VMware Horizon Client configuration, there's allowed display scaling, which basically can be enabled or disabled. And basically display scaling for the desktop and application session. And what does display scaling means? Is basically, does it match your physical desktop or not? Does it always maintain the same size? Okay, always on top. That's something we looked at previously as well. But basically, when we launch our VMware Horizon client and it connects to a virtual desktop session, does it immediately go on top of everything else? By default, it's disabled. But if we configure it, it means just goes on top of everything. Okay, no big deal really. Nothing seriously big deal about that. The automatic input focus. So this is again, the previous one was pretty on top. But automatic input focus, basically, you know how you got a computer and mouse, you're connected to the local end device, aren't you? But when you connect to a virtual desktop, it's a bit like connecting to a virtual machine. You have to almost click into the virtual desktop to enter commands as well as use the mouse inside the virtual desktop. But this automatic input focus, basically, if we enable it, will automatically bring the virtual desktop window to the forefront and then connect our mouse keyboard to that virtual desktop machine. Automatic shortcut installation will automatically install shortcuts from the Horizon server without any user prompts. So basically, if there's some shortcuts, it doesn't need for the user to say, okay, yes, whatever, it just does it. We can enable or disable this feature. Disable desktop disconnect messages. Basically, if you accidentally disconnect or the network is lost, you'll be disconnected from your virtual desktop, and basically this message will be displayed. No big deal. Basically, we can disable this. If the tricky bit is if we enable this setting, it actually disables the message. You get it? It's sort of like backwards, isn't it? If we enable this, it will disable it. If we don't enable it, it will not disable it. Okay, so just it's a bit funny like that. Same with the next one. Disable opening local files on hosted apps. So this prevents local file registration for the hosted applications. So this is not so much for our virtual desktop. It's more so for the virtualized apps that we're going to talk about in the future. Okay. The next one is disable sharing files and folders. And basically this turns off the file and folder sharing between the client and the remote session. And this is disabled by default. I can't think of why you want to do that, except for the fact that if you want to prevent malware. Okay, if you want to prevent data leakage. Because if you think about it, remember we said that part of the advantage of having a virtualized desktop is that the desktop exists in your data center. And the resources it's accessing, it's in your data center. And the data stays within the data center regardless of where your user is actually located around the world or in the world. So therefore, they are not bringing any files into your systems normally. All right, that means they can't introduce viruses, they can't introduce malware, they can't introduce suspicious files. And also, it means that any files they work on, they're still located on your data center, even if it's in a virtual desktop, and even if their users connected from America or somewhere else, their still data is actually still in your data center. But obviously, if we actually allow this to share files and folders, it prevents that, doesn't it? It stops all of those things we just talked about. It means that the user can take files from the end device and put it in the virtual desktop. Well, has those files being screened? I know they've got their local antivirus, whatever, but are you happy with that? If you're working with a highly secure area, let's say you're working for the Department of Defense, maybe that's not what you want. Okay, so that might contravene, may make your systems more insecure. So again, same with taking the files off your internal systems and placing on their local end device. That might be on a USB stick or whatever, but but in those highly secure situations, you may want to enable this, which will turn off the file and folder sharing between clients and remote session. And by default, it's disabled, as in this setting is disabled, which means it's allowed, but you may want to turn this off if you don't want to allow it. Okay. Don't check monitor alignment on spanning. So this is just funny. Like, for example, I've got two monitors here on my computer, and basically my normal desktop goes across the two monitors. That's called spanning. But when you connect to a virtualized desktop, you'll see later on when you do the previous one, it opens full screen. It will open full screen across all your monitors. And basically, this setting allows spanning across non-rectangular monitors. What does that mean? What if you had this monitor, but that's one of those old-fashioned, square monitor? Okay. What if you've configured this monitor as a different size? So basically, if you enable this, it allows you to span across those as well. We talked about toast notification as well last time, but this again disables those little notifications that pops up on your desktop. Then there's this enable multimedia acceleration. So this is just allows the multimedia or the graphics to work better in your virtual desktop. But again, anything that allows for this acceleration or allows better performance consumes resources. And to be honest, do you want to consume more resources? No, not really. Not especially in our situation. Definitely not in our situation. But in a normal virtual desktop environment, like I said, the example would be for a call center. Whether or not their screen looks beautiful or not, it does not matter, right? Whether or not their animation works well or not, doesn't matter. As long as they can do their job, as long as they can access the information systems they need to perform their job on the call center, that's all that matters. The next one is enable multimedia. Oh, sorry, that's the one we talked about. Enable relative mouse. This improves mouse performance again in the PC over IP sessions, and that's only for that specific way of connecting. If you remember, we talked about how we can connect to our virtual client. Okay, there's 3 protocols we could use. That's the VMware Blast, which is what we end up using at the end of last session. There's the RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, and there's also this PCOIP or PC over IP. Again, the next few is to do with the next one is to do with visibility of the menu bar on top of the client window. So enable the shade. This is enabled by default. There's a next couple is hiding items, hiding them from the user themselves. Always hide remote floating language IME bar. Force the hiding of the floating language bar on the hosted apps. Hide items in the application context menu. So this can configure visibility of application context menus. It's disabled by default, but you can actually enable it. The next one is default value of the hide selector after launch item checkbox. If we do this, we configure automatic hiding of the selector after session launch, and this is disabled by default. Hide items in the desktop context menu, and this again manages the visibility of the desktop context menu, and again is disabled by default. Hide items in the desktop toolbar, controls the visibility of specific items in the desktop toolbar, and this is default is all items are visible. So again, there's so many settings, but a lot of them is not very important. It depends on you if you feel like you need to do these kind of things for your organization or not. And a lot of times, basically the default configuration is fine. So hide items in the system tray menu. So you know the system tray, just in case you didn't know, this area here is called the system tray. Can you see my mouse there on the bottom right-hand corner? Yeah, that's the system tray. And obviously this is hide items in the system tray, manage the visibility of items in the system tray on the local Windows screen. Hide client toolbar menus. So hide toolbar items such as favorites, settings, the settings gear. So basically, again, allowing them to to be able to see or not. The next couple is quite important because obviously, like I said, when we're switching from the physical endpoint device and the virtual desktop, we've got to give focus. The same idea as when we have a VMware window. Unless we click into the VMware window, whatever we're doing is on the physical machine, right? Same idea. So, but there's a hotkey. Hotkey, what does that mean? That means instead of actually clicking in, I can press a keyboard shortcut, keyboard key combination, and automatically grabs focus. So define a hotkey combination to quickly grab focus for the last used session, or we can create another shortcut keystroke combination, which actually releases the focus. Pin the shade, control the visibility of the pin on the top of the client window. And to be honest, that's not a huge deal. It's just like that remote desktop. You can pin that menu toolbar or not. Display modifier function key. Configure key press to change the display configuration on the client device. These settings here are specific for remote desktop protocol. Remember, we talked about VMware Blast, PC over IP, and remote desktop. And these ones, audio redirection, which we talked about before, the bitmap cache and bitmap cache persistence is to do with all of these are to do with remote desktop. Basically, redirection is redirecting the internal audio of the virtual desktop to your physical device. Okay, this bitmap cache, as you know, is a temporary storage, and this is defining the size of the bitmaps, and how persistence is whether it keeps it or removes it. So enable persistent bitmap caching to improve performance. So if you don't know, RDP, instead of sending the whole desktop in one big thing every time, it only sends you the little bits that changed. So that means all the parts of the desktop which has not changed is not being sent to you. So that's just using the, if it hasn't changed, why do we need to be sent, right? So that's kept in cache. So only the parts that have changed is sent to you, which makes the traffic a lot less. And obviously, the performance is much better if we're only sending a little bit of information. Okay. Color depth, that's just like how much color, 32-bit, 16-bit, whatever, true color. Desktop composition, so redirect Windows drawing to video memory for improved rendering. Cursor shadow, so you see how my cursor, you can't really see it on mine actually, on this one, but you can see that sometimes on your own desktop, you might see a little shadow. All right, so it's just a visual effect. Again, do we care? Not really, okay? Not a big deal, but if you turn on cursor shadow, it just wastes a resource to do that. Same with the show contents in Windows while dragging. So like, for example, oops. All right, so see how I'm dragging this window? You can see what's inside the window, can't you? All right, so if I take this window and I drag it, you see how you can see what's in it, but really it doesn't make a big deal. All right, so it doesn't make a big deal, does it? Because really, realistically, when I'm dragging it, it only looks good. It's not like I can read it. You know what I mean? So it only looks good for not much benefit. So basically, show contents while dragging windows, window dragging, basically just allows you to see what's inside the window while you're moving it. To be honest, no one's going to read it while you're moving it. But that, again, reduces resource utilization. It requires resources to show you that. So if we actually turn it off, not show the contents, it actually saves resources. Okay. And same with the menu and Windows animation. So you know how when you minimize something, oh, you see the animation, right? You see how it animates the window, doesn't it? It's almost like a cartoon. It's not just on or off. It's shrinking and expanding, right? So that's the animation we're talking about. Okay, so is there any benefit to that? It only looks good. There's not real life benefit to if you see the animation or not. And again, if you want to turn it on, it's up to you, but you're just wasting resources. So, and what we're here for is obviously, resources are not finite. Resources are not infinite, should I say? They're finite. There's always a limitation. Okay, and you want to minimize the unimportant stuff. The themes determines if the desktop themes are displayed. Again, that only allows your client to look, the person using it to look good. Desktop background, configure where the desktop background is shown. So if your let's say your call center users, they can set their own beautiful desktops. But again, that's something that's going to cost you. Enable auto connect. This is actually something that's actually important. All of those previous ones are not too important, mainly for the look and feel of it. But this auto reconnect allows RDP clients to reconnect automatically if the connection drops out and reconnects. You know how sometimes your Wi-Fi, there might just be a little temporary dropout, or even your internet connection, or even your network connection. but basically reconnect just reconnects you back to the session. It's disabled by default, so it's a good. This is a good one to enable. Enable compression enables RDP data compression, and this is enabled by default. So compression means better performance, basically. Enable credential security service provider. So configures network level authentication for secure connections. And obviously that's quite important for us to keep that. Font smoothing. So this is only for looks again. Apply anti-aliasing to fonts on the remote desktop. So make it smooth or not smooth. The key thing is really, does it look good? Can you see it? Windows key combination redirection. Configure where the Windows key combinations are sent. Enable audio capture redirection. So redirects the default audio device to the client, disabled by default. Audio redirection configures how audio is redirected to your client. And I think the case size. We did this again, haven't we? So this is one of those situations where I reckon I have done something that I shouldn't have done. So that should be out of there. Okay. And I've done the same thing as what I've talked about in the past. And that is I've accidentally tried to fit too much on the window, and I put on the next slide, but I didn't get rid of it properly. So this one is altogether gone. Okay, so I think that's better. Okay, sorry about that. That's something I overlooked. So this is integrated printing. So again, if you have a physical device connected to your end device, you want to use it. So do not. So one of the settings is do not redirect client printers. That prevents client printers from being redirected to a remote session. Default is not configured. So why do you want to do this? It's just like if you have top secret documents, you don't want them to print it necessarily either. Okay, so that's why you might want to stop that. But you can also allow it. We can allow for L1 local printers to enter sessions. The purpose of this is to configure the local printer in the nested session. Default is not configured, and these are the different layers. You could have endpoint device with your physical device. You can have your remote desktop, which is the layer 1, and then from that you can connect to another remote desktop, couldn't you? Potentially. So that's layer 2. So you could actually keep on going. This is the VMware agent that we installed. Okay, so the agent is that bit of software that's inside the virtual desktop, and time synchronization, disable time synchronization, synchronizes time between the virtual desktop and the end user device. Yeah, I think that's important only if your clients are going to be in a different time zone. But it's only important if you want them to display the right time zone. Okay, so for example, if I'm in America right now, I don't know what time it is, but if I want to see the right time on my virtual desktop, that would be important. But it's disabled by default. But why? You're probably wondering, why do we not want it? Again, if it's not, if we turn on the setting, it's going to disable time zone synchronization. It just means that like if again you're in a secure environment where your client machine is in your data center, you want to keep everything local. It doesn't matter where the person is sitting, really. You're working in the time zone of your data center. And this DPI synchronization, the dots per inch, adjust the DPI settings for multiple screens to match the client devices OS settings. So basically, it just matches up your virtual desktop to the physical desktop. DPI synchronization is a system-wide DPI remote session to match the OS DPI. Default is enabled. So you can do this per monitor, or you can do this for all monitors. Accept SSL encryption frameworks channel, so enable or disable the acceptance of SSL encrypted connections. Enable user profile customization for hosted apps. So this is to do all the applications that we're going to talk about in the future. And only launch new instances of hosted app if arguments differ. Control the launching of new instances if existing instance is disconnected. So that's to do with the virtual horizon applications. Scanner redirection. So scanners, you know what scanners are. They scan physical papers and turn them into electronic documents. And a lot of these things like printers and scanners, they're not that important anymore these days, are they? It's hardly anyone really prints and hardly anyone really scans these days. I know I've got a scanner and a printer at home. It's very, very rare I use it. We've got access to printers and scanners here at work as well, but it's very unusual that I ever use the printer or the scanner, only for those physical test papers or scanning someone's physical test paper. That is very rare now, but we can redirect scanners, and we can put a bandwidth limit, set a bandwidth limit for sending scanned data to a remote session, because obviously if it's too high, then it could overwhelm the connection. Compression, configure the image compression rate during data transfer. Force the Twain scanning properties. So this is, I don't know too much about Twain's and so forth, but that's to do with the scanner itself. There's also the serial comms. Configure serial comm settings to which are the same as the computer configurations. Watermark. This is actually quite fun. This is basically just allowing us to display something on the desktop. It's you know how you've got additional text. I'm sure you've seen a watermark on other things like documents and so forth. But enable watermark basically adds a customizable watermark to a virtual desktop screen, and you can, in a text box, we can enter up to 250 characters, and some of these characters can be variables. So, for example, the IP address, the username, and stuff like that can be just displayed on the desktop. We can change the layout. We can make it tiled so it's repeated across the desktop. We can make it centered. We can display on multiple displays and so forth. Yep. Yep. No, on the background. Yeah, in the background on virtual desktop. Okay, let me just see if I can find a picture for you. Okay. All right. So it's probably easier if we see a picture. All right, let's go to images. So if we look at these are images, but you can see there's a QR code in the sort of the background like that. If you have any open window, can you see that? Yeah. So in this case, there's a QR code. That's fine. But it's basically it's almost like on the background, and if you have any windows open, it'll be on top of that. It'll look like it's in the background. Let me see if here's the ones that I'm talking about. This is like a watermark from the Microsoft, but that's again little bit of text that's on the background. And if you have a window on top, in this case that's not it. Okay, let me see if I can find anything else. So this one, for example, I think that's actually a remote desktop, and this is actually 45 degrees, and this is what we can configure on the watermark. What it's going across like that, and that's what you see. I know like all these things seem so affected, but if you open a window, it goes on top of it. Okay. All right, so that's what it is, and we can change the layout like that. 45 degrees is the default. We can change it to 90 degrees. We can change it to 180 degrees, whatever. And like I said, this is a short, sharp session, and to be honest, you don't even need to do the worksheet. It's not that important. Okay. If there's a worksheet you don't have to do, it's not important. It's probably this one. Especially if you're a little bit behind, maybe it's something you can work on the assessment instead. Okay.